So thanks for having us today. Thanks for lunch. There's a couple of us here from the group. Like Mark said, we're a relatively new group, Water for Whatcom, and we came together to work on water issues, which I'm going to talk about a little bit. I just introduced, Mark did a pretty good job. Rich Appel's here with me today, Apple Farms and Cheese out on Northwest Road, off Northwest Road, partway between Ferndale and Linden. You know, he's involved with family farmers. He's involved with the Laurel Watershed Improvement Districts. He's involved with a lot of ag stuff for years. Carl Weimer, somebody mentioned they'd heard my name. I was on the county council for 12 years, so my face and name showed up in the newspaper from time to time. I was the executive director of resources for 13 years. I've been working for the Pipeline Safety Trust for I don't know how long now, 20 years. I'm still working a little part-time because I've been a complete failure at retirement. And recently helped found the Whatcom Environmental Council. We kind of thought it was good for two of us to come, because if you've been paying any attention to water issues in Whatcom County for the last 30 years at least, you'll know that I represent environmental interest on the Water for Whatcom, and Rich represents agricultural interest. And you know that agricultural interest environmentalists haven't particularly got along very well on a lot of water issues over the last 30 years. We're often butting heads and stuff. So what's really unique about this new Water for Whatcom is we're trying to bring people together that don't get along, haven't traditionally got along very well, to kind of reach across the aisle and do differently than what they're doing in Washington, D.C. these days. So, you know, Rich and I and others, and I'll move right on. Here's a shot that shows the 16 of us that are involved, and we have a pretty diverse background. The steering committee for Water for Whatcom is myself with environmental interests, Perry Eskridge, who's with the BIA and the Realtors, and Fred Lickel, who's with the family farmers. So farmers, development community, environmentalists all working together to try to come up with solutions. Pretty unique. I've never been part of a group quite like this before. And you'll see we have a whole range of other people on there too, from different backgrounds, and we're still looking for a handful of more people to add to the group. You know, there's some basic things that we believe in, and what we're trying to do is really find a way to deal with some significant water issues that are going on in the county. There's way too much water in the winter, floods, not enough water in the summer, droughts, and that affects a lot of people, and that's really those seasonal weather extremes are being escalated by climate change. And it used to be if I came to a group like this 20 years ago and talked about climate change, there'd be a big argument. But even with the diverse people within Water for Whatcom, there's no argument about whether climate change is making things worse. We agree about that. We also see that there are some regulatory issues on the table. A lot of the rules for how water is dealt with were written probably, some of them 100 years ago. And things have changed a little bit in the last 100 years. So being stuck with a law that was written when there was 20,000 people in the county versus now when there's 200,000 doesn't always work. And there's continuing to be more development. Natural areas are getting converted to housing. Farmland is getting converted to housing, and that's an issue for a lot of these water issues too. So it's a group of people with these diverse interests that came together to try to find a way to collaborate to find solutions, and I'm going to talk about why we think that's important here shortly. First thing we didn't really know what the solutions were, but we knew we wanted to bring people together to collaborate. So we hired a very talented consultant who is filming me over here to put together some short little videos for us to basically hit the heart. So if you pay no attention to anything else I say, just watch this video. So that's really what we're trying to do, deal with the too much water in the winter, too little water in the summer, and all the other habitat and water quality issues. Talk a little about what the problems are. Like I said, there's too much water in the winter. You can see the pictures of flooding. We've had 2 100-year floods in the last 4 years. That tells you how things are escalating a little bit. And every time we have one of those, it impacts tremendously the people whose homes gets flooded, but it does lots of damage to infrastructure. It damages habitat. It does all kinds of damage, millions and millions of dollars. The flip side of that same coin is that there's not enough water in the summer, which really surprises people, especially people from not around here where they think it rains here all the time. But you can see from the map there, that's the Department of Ecology's emergency drought declaration area, and we're sitting right in the middle of that. And that's a big deal because the streams get too warm and they don't have enough water in them, so it's really hard for salmon to survive. There's a huge increase in forest fire risk. I think we're all getting tired of breathing smoke in August around here. Looks like this year might be another one of those. And there's just not enough water for all the human uses that want water out of the river. So that's kind of what the two problems are. People wonder where our water goes. This graph shows where the water throughout all of Whatcom County goes, and you can see that agriculture uses about 2/3 of that to water crops. It's hard to get strawberries and raspberries and blueberries if you don't give them any water. So, and it takes a lot of water. The other third pretty much goes to our cities and water districts to provide water to all of us for doing whatever we're doing. And that's where a lot of the water goes, and those are the main stakeholders that are going to be part of the adjudication that you heard about. But that really only tells part of the story. The other story that isn't represented here as a water use is what's good for the environment, what's good for salmon. And this graph shows a little bit about that. The white jagged section on the bottom of that is how much water is in the river going past Ferndale. This is from September of last year. So that shows how much water was going down the river. The red line is what the Department of Ecology has decided is the needed in-stream flow for healthy salmon. So you can see last September, we were hardly ever leaving enough water in the river for the salmon. So I see somebody wants to question, that's fine.
Two spikes. Were those rainy periods or?
I didn't go and look, but I'm guessing we got rain a couple of days there. Yeah, because I don't know what else it would be. It wasn't like the city of Linden quit drawing water or a glacier melted overnight. So it had to be a couple of rainfalls. But it shows, and if you look at any particular creek or any part of the river, you'll see a very similar type of thing. Mark mentioned that there's an adjudication going on. The adjudication is a very legal process. It's the Department of Ecology basically coming in and suing 30,000 people that have water rights here in the county. Because, this is my opinion, not Water for Whatcom, Department of Ecology has not done a very good job of dealing with water rights or keeping track of that. So they don't know who has water rights, and this court proceeding will figure that out. They're going to ask people to fill out a bunch of paperwork about how much water you use, where you're getting it from, how you use it, when you got that water right. And the courts are going to try to figure that out for 30,000 different water right holders over the Department of Ecology guesses that's going to take 10 to 20 years. People that have been involved with adjudications in other places say that's a very rosy picture if you think you're going to get done in 10 or 20 years. Over in Yakima, they've been going well over 30. Adjudication really is based on kind of an antiquated water law. The foundation of water law is first in time, first in right, which basically means if Rich Appel at Apple Farms got his water right in 1920, and the city of Linden got their water right in 1940, and there's not enough water in the river for salmon, the Department of Ecology can go to the city of Linden and say, you have a junior water right, you need to turn off your water so Rich can get his because he's got a senior water right. I'm just making up numbers here. I don't know who's senior, and that's what ecology is trying to figure out. So ultimately, adjudication is going to settle who's using water where and who got it first. And then, 20 or 30 years from now, the way they would solve that is just to start turning water off to places. And that's starting to happen around the country. That really isn't a solution to these problems. It's just choosing winners and losers. Here's just kind of a list of possible, just looking at the drought side of the coin. The county and others have been doing studies for years now, so they've identified a whole lots of possible solutions. And this is just kind of a laundry list of them. Things from not using as much water to conserving water, using it more efficiently, to putting dams on the river, turning beavers loose to rehab wetlands, all kinds of different things. So there are ideas out there, it's just no one's moving very quick on any of those ideas. Just to give you kind of a sense, here's some cost estimates of some of those things on that prior list. And that's another reason why we wanted to bring our group together, because if you look, and if you've read the paper, the county doesn't have 2 nickels to rub together these days, let alone, $2 billion to build a dam on the Nooksack River, or $10 million to restore Musto Marsh. So these things are kind of out of the realm of what the county and local government can pay for. So it really is going to take an influx of money from the state or the feds, or some magic person. If Elon Musk is hiding here in the audience, I'd like to talk to him afterwards. There's people that are ahead of us on this. They've been going through this in Yakima for years now, and they've come up with the Yakima Basin Integrated Plan, which is now starting to push out solutions. So we can learn and hopefully jumpstart our efforts here. Because while the adjudication isn't going to solve the solutions, coming together collaboratively, we can come up with solutions. And then we don't need to wait for the adjudication to be finished to do that. There's some quotes there. I'm not going to read through all this, but the interesting thing that in Yakima, everybody lawyered up and they went through the legal process and they fought with each other for years, over 20 years in the courts, and didn't get them hardly anywhere. And then one day, a tribal member and an irrigation district supervisor met in a parking lot. And the irrigation guy said, we should just get together and talk about this. And the tribal member said, well, our lawyers would kill us if they knew we were going to talk to each other, because lawyers don't like litigants talking to each other. But they did. And pretty soon they learned that they had more to agree on than they had to disagree on, and they brought in other people. And pretty soon it became a collaborative process, and solutions then finally started happening. And I love this one quote here, and it's kind of exactly what's going on with Water for Whatcom when we all meet together and all these people who've had these oppositional things start working together. This quote from the Yakima Nation, we understood that what the other side's needs were, and they were no longer the other side. And that's kind of what we're getting to with Water for Whatcom too, that, we all kind of want to defend our positions, but if we get together and listen to each other and develop relationships with each other, there's ways to tweak those positions that probably will give everybody something and probably nobody everything they want. So just getting toward the end here, how do we make real progress on these water issues? We need to make sure our elected officials quit believing adjudication will solve this problem, because it won't. It'll pick winners and losers, and it might take 20 or 30 years. And depending on climate change, we might not have 20 or 30 years before we start losing businesses or losing salmon or both. We need to push those same local leaders to come up with a functioning group that really wants to look and push out solutions. Elected leaders, and I was one of them for 12 years, so I can tell you this is true, love to do studies and then do another study and then, plan for the next study. And it's a great way to kick the can down the road and not make a decision. So we really need a group to come together to start pushing out solutions. And that group needs to include the tribes, certainly, and all the other water stakeholders that have a stake in this. What they've learned in Yakima and what we've already heard from some of our discussions is the state and the federal government isn't going to give us $100 million to solve problems if Rich in the ag community goes and asks for it, and then the environmental community shows up right behind them and says, that's a stupid idea, we don't support that. We need to come together with collaborative solutions and then go to the feds and the state all holding hands, and that's when the money starts raining down then. So that's an important thing to remember. Just kind of the last slide, I think, is what you can do. You can stay informed. I don't know if anybody has seen our little videos on Facebook and Instagram. It's interesting. We spend about $500 or $600 a month getting those onto Facebook. And we get about 50 to 60,000 unique accounts viewing those, interacting with those videos. So it surprised us, I think, the number of people that will look at those videos and are getting that message. And it's month after month we're doing that well for just $500 or $600. So we've got a website up. It's pretty new. Check it out. On the website, you can sign up for our newsletter. And there's also, you can also watch our Facebook page. Also, if you have elected officials at your meetings or if you deal with them on a regular basis, make it clear to them you want solutions. You don't want more studies and planning. It's time to actually start doing something because a lot of this stuff is pretty well planned and ready to go. And finally, there is a spot on our website, or there will be shortly, like I said, it's being developed, that you can donate. So if Elon Musk is hiding here and wants to give us $3 billion to solve our problems, we're glad to take that. Or we're happy to get, $10 from somebody to help pay for our Facebook ads. So I think that's what it was. Questions, and I think Rich probably wants to say something for a minute or two, but we're glad to answer questions too.
Yeah, mostly questions if you have them, but I would say...
Rich, if you can be behind then the folks online
sure.
can see you as well.
Yep. Yeah, I think I think that presentation really kind of sums it up well. But I think we've been asked, what is this problem? Is it an engineering problem? It's not. It's not an engineering problem. It's a relational problem. And when we have tribal members that are, we still need them to come to this table, and we're working on those relationships. But it's a relational challenge. That's where we're at. And so I think, we've also had people ask, why should I invest in what you guys are doing versus paying this group over here who's hired a lawyer and they've decided they're going to fight on this thing and this group's going to fight on that thing. And I just, I feel strongly that this is where we want to invest our money, is invest in building relationships, invest in collaboration, because that can really bring about the solutions that we need. Adjudication will continue to go forward, but it will not provide solutions, and we all know that. And so I think that's really the message is, we may have not been able to sit down together and work on these things in the past 20 years because we weren't forced to, but now there's no other option. And we are going to have to work it out. And if we want our leaders to, pursue the kind of funding that we need to do it, the community leaders within Whatcom County from the diverse groups have to come together. And we have to be able to carry that message, I think, and really demand of our leaders, this is what we want as a community together. And I think it's proven that when you can do that, it's effective. So that's what we're about. It's kind of at the, we're at the kind of the beginning stages in a lot of ways. But we want our county to rally around this and support this idea and, spread the word. So anyway, if there's any questions, yeah.
Isn't it true that the suit was by virtue of the tribes raising concerns about water use and the availability of water, and therefore the county is taking an active approach to figure out who has what rights to what? And again, as you well explained, the timing and so on, but weren't the tribes using this to?
Yeah, I think that the tribe has for years wanted their water quantified, so that they've tried to do this federally, and failing on that, they've gone to the state. And I think that there's more to that story behind the scenes, of course, but ecology is really more than our county. Ecology is the one that brings the adjudication, brings that forward. So.
Yeah, and ecology is kind of looking at it one at a time, and the Nooksack rose to the top of the list a couple of years ago for rivers that really needed the work. Yeah. And like Rich said, the tribes have been trying to get their water, because they have water rights from their treaties guaranteed to them, but the amount of that has never been determined. So that red line that I showed at Ferndale, that will probably be part of the tribal water rights because you have to protect the salmon to meet their tribal rights. But that line, you know, depending who you talk to, could go up or down.
That's not a historical line that was like met at one point. This is where the river flowed at. Comes out of a scientific study that says this is what we think would be the optimum, but you know, that would mean no water for anybody in Whatcom County.
Optimum flow
Right.
for salmon.
Right. Yeah. So but you know, knowing that, can we figure out ways that we can still have a thriving salmon population and still maintain our community? Yeah, I think we all believe that that's possible, or we wouldn't be together, you know, promoting what we're doing.
Where does the water quality fit into your equation?
Well, I think there has been issues with water quality in the past, and you know, the shellfish beds, there was maybe about 10, 12 years ago, there was some shellfish bed closures and stuff, and there was work done on that, and they have improved. But I think water quality will always be something that needs to be monitored. I think as you know, I think there was enough investigative stuff, and the county helped on with a lot of water quality testings, that we found water quality issues coming across the border. We found water quality issues coming out of Linden. Initially, it was just pointed at the dairy farmers, saying, well, it must be the dairy farmers, right? So we had to kind of work through that. But I think with water quality, it will be an ongoing challenge.
Right, there's a lot of solution. There's a lot of these solutions, kind of that list I showed, that could go forward while adjudication's happening. You don't have to figure out the adjudication stuff to start, you know, rehabbing wetlands and turning beavers loose to store water so farmers have more in the summer. We can do that type of stuff. You know, we are not the engineers and people that probably are going to dream up the solutions, but we've watched one process after another where they bring people together to talk about things, and all those people want to do is defend their own position instead of trying to find a collaborative solution that can start moving things forward. So that's really our initial push, is just to convince elected leaders they need a group to push out solutions. You know, we probably will have some opinions on which solutions are better than others, but really we aren't trying to dream up, here's the magic solution at this point.
Yeah, and I think there's already, just in the discussions that we've had, so there is the pie graph with how much water the farmers' irrigation use. That looks like a lot of water. Well, about half of that water is actually being used. The rest of it is in, people have water rights, but they're not using them. But if they were to say, I'm not using, then you lose it. And so, or if you're not irrigating to the full amount that you have a water right, you lose it. So farmers aren't really motivated to report that they're not using, you know, they put in drip lines and they've done these things and they're using just a fraction of the water that they used to use, but there's no incentive. So I think, you know, as a group, we can agree that that water law, if we change that water law, we'll get a lot better picture of actually how much water we're using, and we could incentivize more, you know, more drip lines, more preservation that way. So there's, I think, you know, those are things that are out there that are kind of, I don't think they're low-hanging fruit, and that you got to change ecology's mind on some of this laws. But I think there are things that we agree that we could work on. And so that's just one example, just in that area. But there's probably several more like that we don't need to sit around a table and try to figure out what things we should start on first. There's plenty to get busy on. And I think some of the other issues that, that would be harder to deal with, we'll have to sit down and we'll have to figure that out too. But there's plenty of work to get started on right now. Yeah.
Anything else?
Mark? No other questions? I guess it's my turn to come up and say thank you for coming and speaking with us today.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Great
you.
program.
Thank you both for coming. Yeah.